Welcome back to the Newport property blog. I'm today down in the city centre. I'm by the riverbank looking over the Usk. I'll give you a quick look. As you can see, the river is low. It's a tidal stretch around here. And on the other side, a lot of the modern developments which have come up in sort of recent decades, replacing a lot of the old industrial landscape that used to be on the riverbank. But this isn't actually the subject of the conversation today. I'm here to talk to you about a major change to the letting industry. And this is in the shape of the Renting in Wales 2016 Act, amended by the 2021 Act as well, which is an amendment of the original 2016. I'm not going to be talking about the Act in detail, just dealing with some of the basic provisions, but more what it means to the landlord, and specifically different kinds of landlord. Well, in a nutshell, what this Act does, it changes the fundamental precept on which the entire letting industry in England and Wales has been based since the 1980s. And this is the Assured Shorthold Tenancy, which is a tenancy agreement that lasts for a minimum of 6 months, and which is other-ended by the Section 21 Repossession Notice, which is a no-fault way for the landlord to retake their possession of their property and only require about 2 months in order to do it. Well, this is all now changing, and changing quite substantially. The Assured Shorthold Tenancy is being replaced by occupation contracts. There'll be a separate one for social properties and a standard one for private rental, which is obviously the one that most people watching this are going to be interested in. It basically means that the minimum term now goes up to 12 months from 6, and whilst there is still the provision for an end of tenancy without fault, this now goes up to 6 months. We are told that there are other provisions in the Act that will enable repossession to be sought in the terms of bad debt or antisocial behaviour, but this sounds suspiciously like just the already existing Section 8 provisions, which you can use anyway. It simply means it gets a lot more difficult, and there are other aspects to it as well, to do with continuation of tenancy, successions in tenancy, and this can again have an effect by meaning that you might end up with somebody living in the house who legally has the right to be in the property but isn't somebody that you originally included when the contract was first drawn up or know anything about. If anybody's had joint and several properties in multiple occupation with people coming and going, we'll all understand what sort of problems that can lead to. New legislation is always problematic, and the biggest problem with it is that there are a lot of untested areas, and they normally get sorted out in the courts, and precedents are set. That, in a nutshell, are the main changes. A big change from what was understood what lettings would mean when people originally started letting many decades ago. So what happens now? If you are a big landlord, a big property developer, a big corporate, well, life will probably continue in pretty much the same way as before. Your element of risk is going to be potentially higher because your ability to remove a tenant is going to be significantly less easy, so you will want to be more careful in your due diligence. Likewise, if you are a smaller landlord with a handful of properties, you need to start needing to be far more careful about your referencing process and being very careful about the terms that you agree for people to come in. And there's going to be a lot of untested tested ground in these contracts. It always is when there's a major change, despite all the assurances you get. And so you have to be careful. Don't be the first one to rush in. Let the big boys find out where the courts stand on these things. They've got the resources, and it's part of effectively it's part of what they do. So let them get on with it. No need to be a hero. The big boys are there to do that kind of thing for you. But just be very careful about the vetting process. The people I am perhaps most concerned with, who I worry the most for, are those who have traditionally seen the shorthold tenancy and the Section 21 notice as a good insurance policy to be able to let out something like mum's flat if mum has to go into residential care, or if you're working away and you want to let your flat for a year or so and then come back and take possession of it when your assignment abroad or wherever or other side of the country ends. This, I think, is going to be the area where it gets the most fraught, because the increase in the rights of possession to the tenant could put you in a particularly difficult situation. I have been looking to see if there are special provisions for properties which are the primary residence of the landlord, and I know that these were being talked about. I have to say, I have yet to find them. If they are there, they're buried deep, but I suspect these are things that were discussed and then omitted. And if anybody does know this, if I am being blind and missed it, please let me know, because I ought to know these things, and I have been looking and I can't see them. I suspect they are not there, which means that this, whether or not you are you're letting out your own home or letting out an investment property, isn't going to make any significant difference to the courts. We've had experience over the COVID period of what happens when you have long periods not being able to take immediate recourse to reclaim a property. And we had on top of that not only a moratorium on Section 21s, we had the courts not working. There are repossession cases going through now that will have started in 2020, which is quite a frightening thought. So there is already a massive backlog in the courts, and these changes are simply going to make things more difficult. I'm not going to say it's a good or a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing for a tenant to have more security, but it changes the entire rationale in which an individual landlord must assess the risk to them, the financial risk of becoming a landlord and letting out a property. Because one thing you can be assured of, and I've been in the property industry in one form or another for getting on to 25 years. I hate to admit it, but it's true. And I have been an independent letting agent in Bristol, would you be, for the last 15 years, amongst the other things that I get involved in. I've seen a lot of changes in those time. Most of those changes have come in the last half of that 15 years at a rate that seems to be accelerating, both in England and in Wales, and this process of acceleration doesn't seem to be letting up. So we have to ask, these are the things we know about, what else is coming down the line in the not very distant future? So I think really for most landlords, if you are simply dealing with investment properties, as long as you adjust your expectations and understand there are new limitations on what you can expect from a tenancy agreement, you should be able to do okay. There's no reason why you shouldn't go ahead. But I do worry for those who are thinking of letting out what are essentially primary residences of either themselves or family members who are incapacitated, and maybe looking then to realise that at some point either take repossession or to sell the property at some point down the road. You might find that your ability to do so is compromised in fairly dramatic ways, and fairly major delays may be achieved, with some areas which are a little bit grey and yet to be explored in the courts. I'm going to stick my neck out on this and say that if you are thinking of putting your mum's property into rental, these changes come into effect from July the 15th, only a few months away, and so if they fall over those ages, they will probably be forced to convert soon after. You probably get a year's grace after you go, and then you have to convert anyway to the new terms. You are better off, in my opinion, listing the property for sale, because then at least you can realise the cash value and use that to support your mum. Because what happens if you get a tenant in there who's going to pay for the looking after mum, and then the tenant doesn't pay, and now you have to wait. If they say you can do your Section 8, Section 8s are notoriously slow, courts are already clogged up. If anybody who goes that route this year finds themselves in immediate trouble, I would say you are looking at a wait of 2 to 3 years before you can get your property back. And that is 2 to 3 years in which somebody will be living in that property, not paying rent, and doing, well, who knows what to the property in terms of damage and enhanced dilapidations. it is looking a bit of a minefield for people in that situation. So my advice, list the property and get the capital to be able to look after yourself. More difficult maybe if you're moving away for a while, maybe things like Airbnb are perhaps the best option there. But where somebody is relying on the financial income, I think it's quite risky with the new arrangements. I wouldn't do it. Well, thank you very much. This is quite a bit longer than I thought it was. I hope you found it useful. If you have, please like. If you don't subscribe to this channel, please do. It's free and it helps the channel to grow. If you would like others to hear what I have to say, please share. And if you have something to say, either on the channel in general or on this subject in particular, please leave a comment. I will reply just as quickly as it is possible for me to do so. Until the next video, I will see you later.